The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines. Available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world on TV, radio and online. I bid you all good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be in all the world's time zones. This is The More Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Natalie Sudman. Now, Natalie worked as an archaeologist for 16 years. Before accepting a position managing construction contracts in Iraq. As a female civilian employee of the Army Corps of Engineers in Iraq, she was riding in a truck when a roadside bomb destroyed the vehicle. As a result of the severe injuries her body received from the roadside bomb, Natalie had a near-death experience, where she left her body and entered the spirit world. There it was decided that her work on Earth was not done, and with the help of the spirit guides, they repaired the body so she could re-enter it. Natalie Sudman, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a complete pleasure to have you on, and I always find these subjects on the near-death experience so very, very important because they're key to who we are and why we're here, and to keep our life a lot more in harmony and balance. And your story is an amazing story, but all stories have some beginning. So let me take you back to working as a archaeologist and helping up with the clear-up of Hurricane Katrina, I believe it was.
Yes, I was working as an archaeologist for the U.S. government, and another branch of the U.S. government asked for some volunteers to go help with Katrina cleanup. So I volunteered to go down there, and I did. I worked down there for about 2 months, and while I was down there, I made some connections with Army Corps of Engineers people, which led to a job in Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point one time where I thought, yeah, maybe I can make some money in Iraq. Some crazy thought in my head. But, to go there and to experience it, I mean, what was it like when you got there?
Well, when I got there, I was down in southern Iraq, actually in the British sector, and it was actually very quiet in the area that I was working in for the first month or so. And I was surprised by the posh living quarters. And I mean, we had VCRs and internet hookup in our room and refrigerators. And I thought, wait, are we in a war zone? So that was a little odd.
I mean, obviously you couldn't venture out too much, but from your time spent over there, I mean, what was the living conditions like for the people?
Oh, for the Iraqis, you mean? Well, it varied because, I don't know, maybe we think of a war zone as one big area of devastation, but the violence and disruption really took place in concentrated areas, with great spaces between and with great time distances, not necessarily great, but some time distance in between. So for the most part, the Iraqis were still going to work every day.
Yeah.
And trying to, earning a living and making food and trying to avoid the violent situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess looking back at that period and before as well, you never considered any of the topics that we're going to discuss today, then what kind of family were you brought up in as well? Was it quite a religious family, or spiritual, or neither?
It, quite a religious. It was. We went to church. We were Presbyterians, and grew up in just a suburb of Minneapolis, St. Paul area in upper middle America. So it was a fairly liberal area, but certainly not a lot of talk about things like near-death experiences or anything like that.
No. Now, your colleagues as well that you were surrounded by, again, no talk of spiritual matters or life after death. I mean, this was just not in the vocabulary at the time, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't. No, you can imagine in a military setting that
Yeah.
that kind of thing it really wasn't talked about.
Now, let's go straight to it then. Tell me your day, the day that your vehicle was hit by what was it, a landmine or some sort of pressure device?
I'm not sure how it was detonated, but we had let's see, we had I and three of my colleagues had gone outside the wire to visit some construction projects that we were managing. And so we were traveling in a 4-vehicle armored convoy with armored guards, and we had an Iraqi police escort. And we had visited, I think it was 3 water treatment plants and a road, and we were on our way back to base when a roadside bomb exploded under the right front tire wheel well of our vehicle.
Yeah, yeah, and in your book you referred to the blink moment as well, which we'll just get to. But just prior to that as well, one thing I'd like to mention is that there were signs, were there not, that you were subconsciously planning on leaving anyway?
Yeah, there were. One of the most obvious that I talk about is in the weeks before this happened, I kept getting this urge to pack up everything. And I even went so far as to go buy a couple of trunks and start packing things in my room. And I would start doing this, and I'd stop myself and say, what am I doing? Because I was planning on staying there for at least another 6 months. But that urge was so strong, then again, I'd start packing more things up. And I just, we were working long hours, 7 days a week. So I didn't really stop to think about what's the meaning of this, or why am I doing this?
No, it's those little signs sometimes that we do ignore, and they do have some meaning, but only hindsight sort of lets you see that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, take me to the moment where you had this blink moment, where basically instantaneously of this detonation of this device, you left your body.
Yeah, I had been sitting in the truck kind of head on hand, half asleep after our long day of construction site visits. And one moment I was in the truck, and the next moment I was not. I call it blinking from here to there because it was instantaneous. So I found myself kind of standing on a stage, maybe 15 or 20 feet across, and surrounded by thousands of beings who appeared to me as they looked human, but they looked like they were made of light, and they were wearing kind of robes, and I was. They were kind of arrayed all around me as if I were in a stadium. And I just started downloading information to them. So I knew exactly where I was, and I knew exactly what I was doing. And I didn't even think twice, hey, aren't I supposed to be in the truck? It just didn't even occur to me. I seemed to know exactly what I was doing.
Okay. Now, you say downloading information. Was this a sort of telepathic link with all the people in the audience, would you say?
Yeah, it wasn't verbal. It was all just through thought. And it was really, since I wrote the book, sometimes I think back on this and I think it wasn't really even thought. It was almost like taking a whole concept and uh, giving it
Hmm.
to them through the power of intention.
Okay. And, these beings in this stadium, obviously every word mattered. Everything that you had been through, even, I would suppose, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, but the taste of chocolate would have mattered to them.
Yeah.
That's how interested they were in your life.
Yes. Yeah. It was very, very detailed and very layered. I don't think that I could even unpack it, in my conscious mind right now because it's just so vast.
Yeah.
Our human minds can't really take all that in.
Was it like having a life review in a sense as well?
Not really, because my sense was that and when I go back into it, this was not just information about my life. It was also information that I had sort of gathered with my unconscious, subconscious, and higher self. So it had to do not only with details of my life, or it also had to do with uh, cultural details, and it also had to do with ways that energy interacted with other energies here on the physical plane. So it was very, very dense, layered, and complex, not just about my life.
Okay. So I'm just going to go back here a bit. When you say this blink of an eye, was there a tunnel like some people describe, or was it something of your creation in a sense? You manifested this the way it happened in a way.
Well, I think that we all manifest according to our beliefs and our willingness to experience things. I didn't experience any kind of tunnel. I think that when I look at this, it's more like my consciousness just shifted from one place to another. Like maybe I'm always there, standing in
Hmm.
front of this
Yeah.
vast array of beings, and it's just that that's not where I'm focused right now. Right now, I'm focused in the physical.
Well, I think I did read in your book as well. I might be wrong, but I think I did that some of these beings as well were you felt living parallel lives in a sense. That wasn't their only place of what we could call home as well. They were also having experiences elsewhere, but at that particular moment, were also intently with you as well.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Wow, that's incredible. And that ties in a lot of what other authors have said when taking people under regression. This whole idea that time is not as we understand it, and yeah, past lives, future lives, the present life are all one.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of talking about past and future lives, I just call them other lives because my understanding is you can shift focus and in some way, that doesn't really make sense to our human minds. Everything is happening at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes I get lost in the mental conceptualization of what someone like yourself has gone through, but there's also something much more important than that, I would say. What would you say was the core key message from, and I'm jumping here, but the core key message from what you experienced and why?
I would, well, I think the core key message is that maybe there's more than one, that we're here for a reason, that there is purpose, um, and that our explorations um, of experience, even though they may not be fun to us here in the physical, are fun and exciting and uh, valuable to our whole selves. And I think too that we a really core message is that we create our own experience. We create our own reality. So it's if we want to talk about a war on this and a war on that, we're going to be creating a war on this and a war on that. Whereas if we begin to think differently about who we are and what we're creating, then I think we can create something much more harmonious and much more beautiful to
Yeah.
experience.
And that's not to ignore suffering.
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think there's great power in experiencing that kind of thing. This is all a cooperative venture, and there's great courage, I think, in from the whole self point of view of choosing to experience pain and difficulty, and those things, they're not quite real in the same way from this point of view of expanded consciousness, or from the whole self. They're they're so valuable, and they're understood as just being outside of time, so they don't last. But when you're in the physical body, of course,
Yeah.
it can be excruciating. It can be horrible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess you could say then that, well, maybe the soul does love a negative experience, what we class as negative, but there's actually a lot to get out of that.
Yes, there's a lot to get out of that. And not just for that person who's going through it, but for every person, everyone, everyone who exists. A lot of us think that, oh, I just live this boring little life, because in this physical world hierarchy, we don't have any standing, or we don't stand out as important. But I can assure you that from the other side, from the whole self point of view, every single person, every single experience contributes to the whole. So it's very valuable.
So you could be the most miserable person on this planet to talk to, but that's just as important.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
You're sharing an experience. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also people who do what we would class as wrong things as well. No matter how bad it may be, are we saying that life can gain something from that as well because of the roles that we play within it?
Yeah, this is, I describe this I talk about this kind of carefully in my book, because I don't want to be misunderstood that it's okay for people to do bad things. It's not. And from the whole self point of view, it's absolutely essential to view this from the whole self point of view. If we're going to say even those bad things are valuable, that doesn't mean that we still don't play out our roles here. There is good and bad here, because we're human. And so it's not, if you do bad things, then maybe as a whole self, you're choosing to do that bad thing in order to experience the kind of consequences that are likely to happen if you do those things here in the physical world. You really have to split out the perspective. The physical world, bad things? No, bad things are not good. From the whole self perspective, even that has value.
Okay, well, no, that makes sense to me, and that's a great explanation as well. But just stay tuned, and we're going to be right back after this short break.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained. The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still joined by my guest, Natalie Sudman. Natalie, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's been a really interesting conversation, and I so appreciate you giving us this time for this interview as well. Some fascinating things that you've described, and I love the way that you put them into words as well. Now, going back to your time spent on this other dimension, would you have recognized this place as a place you've been before?
Well, it certainly didn't strike me as strange. I think yes, that I had been there before, and I think it was very familiar to me, and that's why I seemed to know exactly where to go, you know. And once I was there, I wasn't thinking, "Oh, this is weird." It just I knew exactly what to do, and I seemed to know exactly where I was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, could you class it as another dimension, or would you not be able to use that word, or is that the best way to describe it in your vocabulary?
Yeah, vocabulary. uh, I use the word dimension. Uh, Really, it's maybe the best word that we have available, or that I have available anyway. But I guess I would go back to focus. You know, in a sense, time and space are a construct of our human minds. And so, in a sense, that place uh, it isn't somewhere else. It could be thought of as in between now.
Yeah.
But dimension is maybe the best word that I can find in my vocabulary
Yeah.
to give people an idea of what it felt like, because it felt very different. You know, it felt like time and space were very, very different there.
Well, when you say it felt, I mean, was it warm? Was it, how did it feel in a sense? I mean, was it a sort of sensation like feeling down here, or was it simultaneous in a way?
Uh, I guess, that's another focus question, because I think when I was there, I could have focused back into my physical body and felt what that was feeling like. But when I talk about feeling, I maybe talk about there was a great feeling of spaciousness, and I recognized all these beings. They weren't unfamiliar to me, and some of them I felt like I knew very, very well. And so there was an atmosphere of great love and great acceptance, and even admiration for each other. And people go out of body and talk about, oh, the love, the unconditional love. It's indescribable, and in a sense, it is. But we all touch love, and we all have had experiences, even if only for a few minutes, of being totally accepted for who we are. And if you can imagine that expanded into a whole state of being that never is going to go away, it's profoundly relaxing and freeing and really, really beautiful.
Yeah. And you carry that energy with you now, of course.
Thank you. I hope so.
No, you do. So, okay, pretty undescribable in some respects. How long were you there for, do you reckon, if you could put it in some sort of time scale?
Ooh. I don't know, because I can go back into that and feel like I'm there for just a few minutes. And then I can also go back and feel like I'm completely outside of time, like hours or days or weeks could have gone by. And yet then I, can come back into this life in a moment. Because when you're outside of time, then there isn't any relativity. There's nothing to say, well, that was the beginning and that was the end. In a sense, my whole experience that I describe in the book as linear, here, now I went here, and then I had this experience, and then I had that experience. In a way, I felt like all those experiences were happening at once.
That is difficult to get your head around, isn't it? But it's also very fascinating as well when you do take that concept of time out. as we are so addicted to it, that other ways of seeing things become possible. Just describe to us then the series of events that happened while you were there. I mean, was it just on stage and then you decided to come back? Just go through the process.
Oh, yeah. I downloaded this information, and that all these beings sort of accepted it and were kind of digesting it. And then I told them that I wasn't coming back. I told them, sort of projected that thought that I was done, that I wasn't interested in going back to the physical, that I wasn't going to go back. And they accepted this, and then projected to me that they would really appreciate it if I would change my mind because of certain skills that I had with energy. They would really appreciate my coming back into the physical. And they kind of outlined some things that a lot of which I don't remember now, but it sounded interesting to me. It kind of piqued my curiosity, and so I immediately said, okay, yeah, I'll go back.
Did you want to go back?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
At that time I did. I think it's kind of funny because I ended up in Iraq because a friend of mine called me up and said, hey, we've got jobs in Iraq if you want to go. Do you want to? I said, sure. I hung up the phone and then went, oh, do I want to do that? So I guess maybe that's an intrinsic part of even my whole self to just jump right back.
Yeah, you'll just go and do it. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's quite adventurous in some sense, and actually, I've got to put my hat off to you as well. You don't process it too much. If it feels right, you do it. Yeah, I mean, this is an incredible experience that you had. I mean, completely life-changing. Was there beings that were having incarnations in other worlds there as well, would you say?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. That's my sense now, is that not all of those beings, but some of them were having multiple experiences. So some of them seemed totally focused in this experience that I was having. And others, I got the sense that some of them were simultaneously having other lives, not only in the physical world, but in other worlds and other dimensions. When I think of what is, all that is, it's infinite, and infinite means it's not only encompasses everything, but that in my mind, it means that it's always creating. It's always getting bigger and bigger and deeper and deeper. And so my sense was that some of these beings were doing the same kinds of explorations that we're doing here, but in other worlds.
Wow. I mean, it's just, it really does alter your perception of reality if you can just think outside the box and give this some time for a minute. You can really shift the way that you've been thinking sometimes and say, well, maybe if I give this a chance, what will it do for me to digest this information? What has it done for people, digesting your information in your book? How has it changed people?
Well, I think it has the potential to give people a different perspective on things in their lives, or even on who they are and what they're capable of. I think, sometimes, like when I was recovering, I was lying in the hospital bed, couldn't see out of one eye, messed up arm, and I was thinking, I wonder if I will lose sight in this eye, and I was kind of worrying about it. And then all of a sudden into my head came this very clear thought, well, it's only for 40 more years. Only for 40 years. And I just started. But it has that kind of potential, to change the whole perspective on something that you're going through, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, what part of you was that voice, do you think?
I think that was my higher self, my whole self, my well-informed self coming through and saying, it's okay, don't worry about it, little human mind, you're fine.
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? But I guess in a sense, all the healing that you got from this different you that came back through helped you recover, and we'll get into that as well. standing with these beings that, obviously when you were in an arena like that, you would think that the ego might take over, but I'm guessing it never did in your case.
No, there wasn't any ego involved, really. I think the I think that ego is really a human trait. I don't think it's a trait of our whole self. Anyway, I didn't see any evidence of it.
No.
We all just were uh, equals and happy to see each other.
Absolutely, and just touching on what you said before, when that you felt like some of the beings there in the audience, and there was thousands probably, some of them were having multiple incarnations at the time. Who knows where we go in some of our dream states, that perhaps we are going back home and being involved in situations like this to help us on our journey at that moment.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, you just never know. Um, well, so you had a choice to stay, but you chose not to. Was there any sort of final messages before you snapped back into your body?
Well, I then what I call blinked to another environment where I call it the deep rest environment, because I felt like it was almost like completely turning into myself, and I was in this vast, spacious emptiness. It wasn't like a scary void though. It was like a really delicious sort of warm blackness. And there I kind of was very very casually sort of paging through my life. And I guess that would be what people would call a life review. But for me, it was more like just pondering and kind of paging through, looking for things that had unexpected consequences, or um, uh, especially creative things that I happened to do, because those were the things that interested me. There was absolutely no attention paid to whether I had been good or bad, or evil or kind. None of that came into play. I was only looking for things that were unexpected and creative. So that was an interesting sort of life review. And then I blinked back to being with the gathering, the big, what I call the gathering, the stadium. And we exchanged some more information. And I can't remember some of this, but I remember them giving me some information about what they wanted me to do once I got back in the body. And then I asked them for some help too, some reminders to make
Mm,
it a little easier once I was back in the body.
right, right. And well, that place where you just spoke there of reviewing sounds very only judgmental from your own perspective, not from no one, not from some
Yeah.
higher force. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I don't use the word judgment either. I use the word evaluation, because
evaluation.
that's all I was doing. I wasn't judging this is good or this is bad. I was just evaluating, kind of casually evaluating. Oh, look what happened there. Wow, I got to remember that trick, that kind of thing.
Mm, mm, absolutely. And it's kind of like those in the crowd were kind of like students in a sense, and you were part of their evolution and learning, I guess.
I guess in a sense, I thought of them more as colleagues.
Colleagues. Okay.
Like maybe at another time, I would have been up there in the stadium while someone else came and gave us information.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, I've read lots of books and stuff in this subject, and some say that when a soul passes on as well, it has the options to go to sort of schools, and not schools as we know it, but I mean, teaching places.
Yeah, I think we all, at some point or another, or maybe many times, um, learn new things, even as souls or spirits. I think, I think that if we're even here on the physical level, if we when we stop learning, I think life gets a little dull.
Hmm.
And I think that we keep learning even as souls. That goes back to the whole, all that is creation. And so it's constantly and infinitely creative. And I think we're certainly part of that, so we are also infinitely creative. And I think that we're constantly changing and growing and learning from each other.
Okay. Well, look, we're just going to take a quick break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
The Moore Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained. The Moore Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome back to the show. I'm still joined by my guest, Natalie Sudman. Now, Natalie, just before the break there, I really wanted to get into as well. It seems so. It would seem so bizarre to people that a highly evolved spiritual being that's always been and always will be, with all the sort of knowledge that it may have of itself and the universe and creation, why it would choose to have an incarnation to experience all these things that we call life.
Why would we choose to experience the physical world, the
Yeah.
physical life? Um, I guess that goes back to what I said about infinite creation. I think that we're infinitely creating ourselves and deepening ourselves as souls, as spirits, just as the universe or all that is, source, God, whatever you want to call it, is also an infinitely creative being and is always creating. And it always, not only, yeah, always creating. I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. No, that's fine. I mean,
We're expressions of that, all that is. We're expressions of that creativity, and we extend that creativity.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's maybe then I suppose, like other people have told me, for that creativity to take place and for lessons to happen, for on behalf of creativity and yourself, that there needs to be a veil. You need to have to forget your connection with who you truly are, for that process to take place, I suppose.
Yeah. So even though we're infinite beings, we're also infinitely creative. So we have all this potential, and just like God, all that is, source, whatever you want to call it, is infinitely creative and always creating, always expanding, always going deeper. We do the same thing as individuals, as expressions of that, all that is. So we are also infinitely creative. And part of coming into the physical world is exploring that creativity and expanding it and deepening it.
Yeah, and actually, in my head right now, I don't know, it just makes complete sense. I have wondered about it on and off with interviews, but actually speaking to you now, I'm thinking, you know what? Why not? Why wouldn't we do that to ourselves, as a soul, to expand it? I mean, some things are beyond our comprehension because of the veils being closed, but it kind of makes sense in a way. Thank you for that. Okay, we're moving on because we've got a lot to talk about still. Let's go to the point where you had reviewed the positive sides of your life, and you'd gone back to the stage. At what point did you go back into your body?
Well, after I exchanged a little more information with that big gathering of beings in the sort of stadium-like setting, then I blinked to another place, and I call this the healing environment. It was like I was maybe hovering over the scene of the desert with the trucks below, and maybe at a 45-degree angle up here, from a couple 100 feet. And I was with two other beings. And from that point, we could see my body in the truck, and we could see the sort of energy matrix that shapes a body or creates a body and then maintains that body. And so we began playing with healing my body, choosing my injuries. So at first we were goofing around a lot, like wave a hand and I'm totally blind in my right eye, and we thought that was very funny because we were out there, not because we weren't looking at it from a physical world viewpoint. We severed my right hand and then thought it was hilarious as I tried to learn to write with my left hand and do everything with my left hand. So that's only funny from that perspective. It's not so funny once you're back in the body. But after we had finished messing around, we were like, okay, that's enough, just set the injuries. So then I chose the injuries that I wanted, that I felt would position me best to do the things that gathering had asked me to do, and also to explore my own creative experiences. So that's really key for me, that I chose my injuries. I'm not a victim of anybody. I'm not a victim of the person who made that bomb. I'm not a victim of the war. I'm not a victim of anybody. I created this, and I created it for valuable reasons and with a sense of joy.
That is pretty amazing. And also probably, well, actually to me it resonates so much truth. So, when did you come back to your body?
Yeah, then from there, I kind of came down one more level, and it was kind of like being between moments. It was kind of a Twilight Zone kind of place. Like the whole scene was frozen, and I was kind of standing next to the truck, and I just took a deep breath and popped back into my body. With an audible pop, I heard the pop in my ears when I came back in.
Okay. Now, obviously, you survived the event, but I mean, how many people died in the event?
One of my guards died, and the other three of us in the truck were all severely injured.
Yeah. How long did it take you to recover in hospital and also what was the extent of some of the injuries?
I was in hospital for about 1 month, and then I was an outpatient for another 2.5 years or so. So I had, besides a lot of shrapnel and some cuts across my face and stuff, I had a broken heel, and both the radius and ulna, both my forearm bones were shattered, and my wrist was broken. This is all on the right-hand side. And I had a hole in my skull right here that exposed the frontal sinus.
Wow.
All the bones on the right side of my face were broken. And I had a skull fracture, which I think is really funny because it seems redundant in my head.
Oh,
and
my
the whole
gosh.
head is a great one for jokes, too, if you think about it.
Right.
And then I had blunt force trauma injuries to my right eye, which led to a retina detachment. And the retina was all tattered anyway, so they put it back on. But and this injury also damaged muscles. So this eye kind of wanders off and doesn't see very well. But.
Okay. So these are pretty severe injuries then. How quickly, when you was in hospital, did you remember the events of what took place to to where you are now? I mean, talking about them.
Well, I had little moments like I mentioned earlier, where I'm lying in bed. Oh, am I going to be blind? And then, oh, it's only for 40 years. But I didn't, and I had little snippets of this experience that kind of came back. It was almost like at first like a dream. Did I dream that? And it wasn't until after I got out of the hospital and got off a bunch of the drugs that I was sitting on the couch one day, and it was like all of a sudden I remembered the whole thing as if like a very vivid memory. I mean, it's still completely real to me. Yeah.
I mean, who did you first tell?
I didn't I didn't tell anybody. I just started writing the book.
Oh, right. Okay. That's spontaneous, that is.
Yeah, I didn't know whether I wanted to tell anyone. And I also didn't know whether I wanted to write the book. But I decided that I would write it just for myself, and that if I felt like at the end, when I was finished, if I felt like maybe it would be of use to people, then I would try to get it published. So,
Okay. Well, what was the reaction? I mean, how did it get published? Just tell us that quickly. I mean, what was the process there? Was it pretty quick or?
no, not really. I sent it out to a few agents and a few publishers, and I got a few rejection letters. And and about maybe a year and a half after I had sent out these submissions, I got a phone call from Ozark Mountain Publishing. And they said, "Have you sold the book?" And I said, "No." And they said, "Oh, good, we want it."
Wow.
So it was a slow process, and I didn't, I wasn't pursuing it real actively. I just sent out that first burst, and then I was doing rehab and, doing other things, and
Mm.
thought, well, in a couple of years, maybe if I don't hear anything, then I'll send out another round.
You just
But
let go and let God, didn't you? And that's what you did. Um, okay, so let's move to the family. When your family found out about your experience, how did they accept it?
um, my family is half German. So their reactions are pretty low key.
Okay.
Like uh, uh, I don't think my brother has ever said anything to me about it. My sister has said a few things. I think in general, my family sort of, and they're very supportive. I mean, we're very
Of
supportive of
course.
each other,
Of
whether
course.
we believe each other or not. So I think they all thought it was very cool that I wrote this book. And I'm not, uh, my mother and my sister, I think, were very interested in the experience itself. And maybe my dad and brother too, but it's not really expressed that way.
No, but I'm sure deep down it will be a benefit to them for anything that they have to go through in the future, or any any events that happen. I mean, it can only be a source of reference to that. Oh, okay, that did happen, and yeah, yeah, that makes sense, and I mean,
I hope so. My
yeah.
father had a heart attack in the early 2000s, and um, obviously before my experience. And I was living down in Florida. He was living up north. So as I hop a plane, I think, oh, maybe I can find Dad, and I go like this, and I'm like, I find him flying around the southwestern United States. And I tell him, Dad, you need to make a decision. Either go back to your body or move on. You can do either one, but you need to make a decision. Well, I thought I'm probably making all this up. But then when I got up to the hospital a couple days later when he was conscious, I said, "Do you remember where you went when you passed out?" And he said, "Yeah, I was flying around the southwest." And I thought, oh, I didn't make it up.
No, you did not.
And so I think when I told him that later, because he was really drugged up and he didn't quite remember later, I told him that, and I think that that story helped him maybe connect with my story a little more.
Yeah, and also, I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, I'm just having to move forward here because I know how much time I've got left, and I'm sorry to have to do this. Um, but also, when you come across people in your life now who, for whatever reason, are not happy, are in a bad place, no matter what energy they've got, how do you treat them differently now as well?
I don't. I don't really know how I treat them differently, but in my mind, I think of them differently. Energetically, or in my thoughts, instead of thinking, oh, that poor person, or get over it or something. Instead, in my mind, I'm going, wow, look at what they're doing. They're so courageous. And a lot of times I'll mentally thank them for sharing that experience with me.
Right.
Because I think that is very powerful for all of us when people go through difficult things.
Yeah, well, that's a great way of giving them some healing as well, and wow, I'll have to embrace that, I think, a little bit, because sometimes I'm guilty of when someone's been quite rude to me or nasty, that thinking, oh, whatever I might think, and then I think, well, we are one, and we are from the same place in a sense. So, you're here to learn unconditional love. But that's a good way of coming across. And
yeah, I don't want to make it sound like I'm a total angel either, because I have those thoughts too. But then I try to catch myself, or at least later, kind of close my eyes and return to that and say, sorry, I do love you. I know we're all.
Hey, we are still having a human experience here, so I'm not judging. Okay, you probably answered this, but let's ask just quickly: what is the most important message summarized up with what you've gone through and the book as well? Just again.
Yeah, every time I think of this, maybe I think, oh, but what about that? Because I think there's a lot of important things. But I think maybe one of the most important is that we choose our experiences. So it's important to, I think, at least open up to finding some beauty within any experience. And sometimes that may seem impossible, but I think that if we're even willing, that opens the door to some amazing perspective shifts that can change the way you think about what you're going through and what you're experiencing. And we are all one. We are all connected. So, those compassionate thoughts and those kind thoughts, they're very powerful. And I think that the more we become conscious of the power of our thoughts, the more we can begin to create some really beautiful cooperative creations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Natalie Sudman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Well, we've come to an end on today's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on The More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.